Welcome to Stand in the Gap Today with your host, the Honorable Sam Rohrer, President of the American Pastors Network, addressing the most pressing issues impacting our economy, our homes, our churches, our culture, and our daily lives from a biblical and constitutional perspective. Stand in the Gap Today, transforming the culture one heart at a time.
Hello and welcome to this Wednesday edition of Stand in the Gap Today, and it's another Israel, Middle East, and Prophecy program. Today, Dr. Bill Salus is joining me for a focused prophetical consideration of this question. Is Hezbollah, Hezbollah, the one that's the terrorist group that's in the Middle East, is Hezbollah situated primarily in Lebanon and threatening Israel with full-scale war? Is that group, are those people identified in biblical prophecy? If so, where? And if so, why? And if so, how should we view the unfolding events which by all considerations there in that part of the world is about to erupt into a life and death clash between Israel and Hezbollah? Now, the specific title I've chosen to frame today's conversation with, again, founder of Prophecy Depot Ministries, Dr. Bill Salus, who's author, a prophecy speaker, and a teacher. He has a website at prophecydepot.com. That title that I'm framing this today is this: Hezbollah versus Israel, a prophetical connection? Question mark. Well, we're going to answer that question today on the program, so you want to stay with us. It's very current. It's very relevant. A lot of questions by some people. Should be more questions by a whole lot more people, because it's a most intriguing question we're going to deal with today. But with that, Bill, thanks for being with me today.
Absolutely, Sam. It's great to always be on your program.
Well, Bill, it's a great thing because a lot of people don't know it. Off your website, prophecydepot.com, you have a lot of people who follow you and what you do. One of the recent programs I know that we did together, you took and posted, was on YouTube or wherever you posted it on another platform, that received a tremendous amount of response, and it was exciting to see. So, ladies and gentlemen, when we have folks like Bill on, our guests, a lot of them have ministries that extend beyond just what it is here, and we try to work together in the furtherance of the truth, and that was one, Bill, that was really exciting to see that, and you can comment on that if you want to, but I want to get right into this. I want to ask you, you wouldn't bring it up by yourself, but when you first came on the program some time ago, I referred to you as Dr. Bill Salus, and you correct me by saying, well, no, I'm not a doctor, but the fact of the matter is, you do now carry the title of doctor, and I thought it would be appropriate, share just briefly, earned, unearned, and, is it given to you? How was it? But what is it? And just give us a little bit more insight into now Dr. Bill Salus.
Well, thank you, Sam. Yes, I did receive my doctorate in May 14th on Israel's anniversary this year. It's an interesting scenario because it's from Louisiana Baptist University of Theology in Shreveport, Louisiana. And what's an interesting story was I was writing books. I've written 12 books now. And some of those books, my typesetter was Dr. Mark Kahn, who ultimately, a couple of years ago, went to become the dean at the LBU, Louisiana Baptist University. And he had me speak there, and he had taken my books and my thesis on the gap between the rapture and the tribulation, 60-some page thesis I wrote. He took them to the school and the board, and they reviewed it all, and they said, listen, we want to award you with the Doctor of Letters, which is the highest doctor degree you can get in theology. And so I said, well, sure, where do I sign? Because I'd poured years and years of research into all my books and teaching commentaries and videos and things. And this is where Dr. Tim LaHaye and Dr. Jimmy DeYoung, Dr. Chuck Missler, they got their degrees there as well. So it was quite an honor that happened on the anniversary of Israel's, rebirth.
Well, I think the Lord allowed that timing to come out just because I think somewhat of a recognition of the work and the focus you've done. But the Doctor of Letters degree is, you say, it really is. It is a very seldom given award, but it is because of all the work that you've done. And I was really thrilled to see that, and I thought, wow, that is deserving. So anyways, Bill, we'll just leave it at that, but congratulations, and God bless you, Dr. Bill Salus. All right, let's get into this if we can, Bill, on Hezbollah versus Israel in the equation that's in there. Here is the question I just want to put before you. You have identified, I believe, 3 prophecies where you think that either, or you believe, or firmly believe, or conjecture, however I want you to answer that either speak about Hezbollah, or at least that region of Lebanon. You can explain as we get into it further in the next segments, but would you identify these 3 prophecies that could well speak directly to Hezbollah and this whole conflict that's erupting between them and Israel?
Yes, there are 3 locations. I think they're all kind of related in a pretty similar event or sequence of events that follow each other pretty quickly, probably in the very near future. The first one I believe will happen is the prophecy in Ezekiel 28, verses 20 through 26, and it's addressing, first it starts with addressing Sidon, which is a coastal city in southern Lebanon. It's a sister city with Tyre. It shows up 17 times in the scriptures together as a sister city with Tyre. Now, Tyre and Sidon are both in prophecies. They are both coastal cities. Sidon is approximately 25 miles above Tyre, and they're in a couple of prophecies. I think they're related. And, of course, the reason that could be significant, that's in Lebanon. And, of course, this is where Hezbollah hails from. In Lebanon, they've got strong footprints in both of these cities. They both still exist today. They're historical cities. And there's one other one called Gebal, another city we look at when we look at prophecy from the Old Testament that could be finding fulfillment in the future. And dealing with Lebanon, perhaps Hezbollah, we would see Lebanon, we would see Tyre, we would see Sidon, we would see Gebal, Gebal. Gebal today goes by Byblos, Byblos. So that's the technical stuff. But the point is, Hezbollah has footprints in all these places right now, and these prophecies have not found fulfillment yet. And inside of these prophecies, you have, of course, Hezbollah existing today. So I would say that, yes, we have Ezekiel 28, we have Psalm 83, where we see Gebal and Tyre. They're actually listed as the inhabitants of Tyre in Psalm 83, which is a concluding Arab-Israeli conflict I've written extensively about. And the term inhabitants, one of the few populations in this 10-member confederacy in Psalm 83 that talks about a habitation condition, and the word is in Hebrew is yeshav, and what it can mean besides just inhabitants, it can mean a people put in place and enthroned. And we see that is actually directly referencing Hezbollah, who came into existence in 1982 to fight off the Israeli invasions, and then they became alive and well in 1992 when Hassan Nasrallah, the current Secretary General, came into place. Oh. So I think we've got 3 prophecies that I'm doing great research on, and it looks like they've not found fulfillment, and they're involving Hezbollah.
All right, excellent, Dr. Bill Salus. Ladies and gentlemen, stay with us, because the next segment, we're going to start walking through this. I'm going to talk to Bill about that prophecy that he's citing, those 3. Have they been fulfilled? He's saying they have not. We're going to talk about that, because some think they have. We're going to talk about other things related to Tyre and Sidon and these prophecies. The theme that we've chosen to deal with today comes off of headline news, but it goes right to the heart of Scripture, and I've entitled this Hezbollah, which is obviously in the news, Hezbollah versus Israel, a prophetical connection, and we're raising that question, and we're going to be resolving that. Now, just a little bit of background here. According to what I'm going to say is generally recognized history sources, Hezbollah is foremost, and again, we've talked about some of this on this program before, and Bill has, and he'll emphasize some of these things again, but they are foremost a Shia Islamic-based political party, not Sunni, makes them the smaller faction of the Islamic world, but Shia Islamic-based political party, that's key, political party, and militant group. Those two together, first emerging around 1982 during Lebanon's civil war, and they emerged as, in effect, a militia. Hezbollah is directly and indirectly aligned with Iran in purpose and strategy. That's why they're often referred to as a proxy of Iran. But since then, 1982 until now, Hezbollah has been, by most sources would say, one of the foremost political forces in Lebanon. That's what many will say. Although there are some claiming that they are, in fact, more than just a foremost political power there, but in fact is the, or are the, singular political force, having effectively taken over the government of Lebanon, some saying even run the Lebanese army. But by definition, I think this is important to understand, Hezbollah comes from two words, Hizb, H-I-Z-B, Hizb, and Allah. Hizb, Allah. Now, some it spells Hezbollah, some Hizbollah, but it's Hizb, one word, and Allah at the end. The definition of that is party of God. All right, so that gives a lot of idea about it. Okay, Bill, I gave just a few basic facts about the political, military, and Islamic religious entity we call Hezbollah or Hezbollah. You cited the biblical prophecies that concern this geographical region of Lebanon, Tyre, Sidon, Gebal, in Ezekiel 28 and Psalm 83. Add anything to what I just said that might be of interest to expand upon this and establish the link between the prophecies you cite and this region of Lebanon now controlled by Hezbollah.
Yeah, you made a good point. Hezbollah, the lines are really blurred right now in Lebanon between politically and militarily. The political parliament and everything, is it really run by mostly Hezbollah now, or some Lebanese government per se, or what about the army? Okay, because Hezbollah's strength is equivalent to the size of a medium-sized army. So a lot of people believe the Lebanese army in relationship to Hezbollah almost are one and the same now. So the lines are blurred. Hezbollah, Jerusalem Post recently said it has 200,000 rockets at this point. For the longest time, it was being quoted they have 150,000. They fought against Israel in 2006 in a 34-day war, and they lobbed 4,000 missiles into northern Israel and kept Israelis in northern Israel on bomb shelters for about that whole month. That was the summer of 2006. Now the concerns are they can launch 6,000 missiles per day effectively. And the first few days of a campaign against Israel, a war which is likely going to happen real soon, Israel's basically suggesting this could happen by the end of July, a war with Hezbollah, reaching deeper into the north, to Lebanon. And then they say that they could then, in the next campaign, second phase of the campaign, of that war campaign, they would taper down to about 2,000 effective missiles per day. Effective meaning not being taken out by the Iron Dome or falling indiscriminately in field. So it's a dangerous threat to the north of Israel, and they are both political and military involved in Lebanon. So we don't want to do what's called newspaper exegesis because we're seeing this war coming forward. We're not just diving into the scriptures to see can we marry up Hezbollah somewhere by their Old Testament names with the scriptures. Exegesis is the interpretation of a sacred text, namely the scriptures. So newspaper exegesis would be taking headlines and trying to marry them up with prophecies. But we're finding that they actually fit up pretty good in a deep study of the Bible. So Hezbollah would show up in Sidon and Ezekiel 28. And what's interesting to note, and when it comes to Sidon and Hezbollah's relationships to it, they established what's called the Lebanese Resistance Brigades. A lot of your listeners might not be familiar with this. And they primarily hail from Sidon, and they resurfaced quite dramatically since Israel's been at war with Hezbollah. Remember, on October 8th, the day after the Hamas massacre on October 7th, Hezbollah started to come into conflict with Israel. They initiated it. And this Lebanese Resistance Brigades resurfaced. And they're a paramilitary group that was founded by Hezbollah in 1997 that's composed primarily of Sunni Muslims and non-practicing Shias. Now, we talked about Sunnis. Sidon is pretty much dominated by Sunni Muslims. However, Hezbollah is a Shiite Muslim group, but these are people they've collected in the Sidon area where they have a large footprint, Hezbollah does, that just hate Israel. And they were created to increase the manpower of anti-Israeli forces at that time and to deny Israel freedom of movement in the non-Shia areas. So basically, and one of the leaders of the Lebanese resistance brigades hails from Sidon, and that's primarily where their headquarters are. The reason I bring that up is because Sidon is the subject of the prophecy in Ezekiel 28, verses 20 through 26. And it talks about in these verses that God's going to judge Sidon. He's against Sidon. It comes up 2 times he's against Sidon. We have to ask ourselves in these verses, why would he be against them? We find out later in the prophecy that he's against them because they're part of a group of Arab populations, countries, terrorist groups that surround Israel, and Ezekiel likens them to a pricking briar that hedges Israel in. Ezekiel 28, verses 24 through 26 tells us that Israel is going to be brought back in the land. They're going to plant houses and build houses and plant vineyards, and they're going to dwell securely when God executes judgments on Sidon and those pricking briar countries around them that don't enable Israel to dwell securely and plant vineyards, etc. Now, if you note in the news now, Hezbollah has been starting fires in northern Israel with their rockets. Mm-hmm. They've bombed major cities. There's about 80,000 Israelis that are evacuated from the north. Don't know when they're going to go back home. If they ever decide to go back home, they can't right now because of Hezbollah. And what we're noticing right now is Hezbollah is clearly a pricking briar against Israel. They're not allowing Israel to build houses or plant vineyards, which the prophecy says they will continue to do after the judgments are executed upon Sidon and this other group of countries, which I believe the other group of countries would be in Psalm 83. We might have time to talk about that. We've talked about it on your show before. But basically, they are pricking briar, according to Ezekiel. They have to be dealt with. There's no political solution for it. We're going to find out the judgments be executed upon those that despise Israel. And then again, Israel will be able to regrow construction and agriculturally, which presently they are not able to do. Certainly down, not by the Gaza, certainly not up into the north. Tourism is basically under a total standstill, and they're not really building and planting at this point in time.
And I think that's interesting, Bill, that the reference there to a picking briar, it's like an incessant nuisance, just aggravating and poking and poking and poking, not to the consequence of an Iran or Russia, but I think that's most interesting what you cited. Let's deal with this in the last 2 minutes in this segment. Some would say that, all right, Bill, you've cited these 3. They are prophecies because that's what they are. They're there, but they've already been fulfilled. We're not looking for them to be fulfilled. Is there any evidence of prior fulfillment?
Well, when this is pretty much talking to you right now about Sidon and Ezekiel 28 with the footprint of Hezbollah, connecting that in prophecy, is pretty much new revelatory information. So we have to be real careful because you're not going to find a lot of commentaries that talk about it the way we're going to talk about it and are talking about it in your show. So we have to look back, and we want to make sure it hasn't been historically fulfilled. Here's a quote from John Gill going back before those in Israel. He was back in 1697. It says, in the midst of, speaking of commentary on Sidon in Ezekiel 28, in the midst of her by the sword upon her on every side, this was literally fulfilled in Sidon. That's part of the prophecy of war, conflict, slaughtered throughout the streets of Sidon, and a massive judgment. This was literally fulfilled in Sidon either by Nebuchadnezzar, that would be about 586 BC, and the Chaldean army, which besieged it on every side, or by Artaxerxes, the Persian king, who took it and destroyed it. So those are the 2 primary arguments, the main one being Nebuchadnezzar in 586 BC. But it's interesting because you look to the scriptures in Jeremiah 27, and after the first deportation around 597 BC, by the Jews, Nebuchadnezzar defeating Israel and taking out 3 deportations, the first one, these places like Sidon and Edom and Tyre, Jeremiah says that their ambassadors are coming to see King Zedekiah, who became the king at that time of Israel, and they're wondering what their future would hold. Basically, now they're concerned, and they've heard about this guy named Jeremiah, this crazy prophet guy, and God tells Jeremiah to let these ambassadors tell their kings that they need to submit because Nebuchadnezzar's going to come take them all in and destroy them if they don't. And it turns out historically it looks like Sidon actually submitted back at that time as a Babylonian administrative document which mentions the kings of Tyre and Sidon as receiving rations from the royal Babylonian household. This is biblical archaeological quote.
And Bill, we're out of time here right now. Ladies and gentlemen, that question posed for this read. Most all Old Testament prophecies had a near-term fulfillment, and most have a long-term. We're talking about this longer one. We'll pick up on this when we come back in the next segment. The brutal Hamas attack against innocent Israelis in the Gaza shocked the world, but to those who understand the deadly cult of Islam, it was no surprise. Pretending to be something it's not, Islam masquerades as peace but means submission. The hatred of Jews and Christians is taught in the Quran, and the death of these are commanded. Still, most Americans are oblivious to this danger within and without. Our Stand in the Gap Radio special edition of What Every Christian Must Know About Islam explains why the rise of Islamic terror is happening and why so many people still defend the most wicked atrocities known to man. This quick read booklet tells you what you need to know simply and clearly. What Every Christian Must Know About Islam, an original publication of the American Pastors Network and Stand in the Gap Radio. It's yours now for a gift of any amount. Just go to standinthegapradio.com or write us at Stand in the Gap Radio, 83 West Main Street, Elverson, Pennsylvania, 19520. Well, in the past on this program, ladies and gentlemen, we've talked much about all these things really we're talking about today. Israel, of course, prophecy, of course, in various forms, and the nations around Israel, yes, and how they are at this point and will be interacting relative to Israel. And that's why we're going here again, this specific part today about Hezbollah, which we just described, and their involvement. Now, Dr. Bill Salus, my guest here today, we've talked specifically, and he's probably one of the first ones to have but to identified, I would say in a new way, I'm thinking the right word to say it, probably the first to identify that when looking at Psalm 83 as an example, that there are in fact within that chapter prophecies regarding Israel and her neighbors which have not yet been fulfilled. So that's what we're talking about here right now. Most of the world and those who are observant of biblical things are focusing and looking on a passage in Ezekiel 38 and 39, which is a very big war involving Russia and Iran in particular. And then there's obviously the Battle of Armageddon, which comes at the end of the tribulation, but we're not going there right now today on the program since the tribulation has not yet begun. But these other two, Psalm 83 and Ezekiel 38 and 39. Bill, I'd like you to take and break these out a little bit more here. Again, you've done a lot of writing on it. These books that you've written on are available on your site at prophecydepot.com. But here's a question I have for you. Do you still believe that the potential next military engagement will be the Psalm 83 war? We're going to put it this way as well, or has this war already been fought, with the next one being Ezekiel 38 and 39, which is what some are believing? So again, go back and undergird what you were saying before in the last segment, and just why Psalm 83, you believe, has not been fulfilled as we're talking, and is not the same as Ezekiel 38 and 39.
Okay, great. Thanks for that opportunity. I would like to say this, resuming from the last segment before the break, that regarding this potential historical fulfillment of Nebuchadnezzar and the Persian king Artaxerxes, we don't really have time to rebut the historical accounts, but I am doing an article with a working title of Hezbollah and Prophecy. It's almost done. It'll be posted on my website. It gets deep into the historical commentaries and things, and my website where you'll be able to find that is prophecydepot.com, prophecydepot, like homedepot.com. So we won't talk about that much more, but I do want to talk about, I think what's going to happen pretty much here is the Sidon prophecy involving Hezbollah is going to lead to the Psalm 83 prophecy, and it's going to, ultimately that's going to then be followed by Ezekiel 38. Now, I just want to say a couple things to make the Hezbollah connection with Sidon, even more glaring. Sidon has become, I told you about in the last segment, the Lebanese resistance brigades that are hailing from Sidon area in Lebanon, but it's become a strategic target of Israel's, the Sidon area, and since October 8th of last year. Here's a couple headlines. As Israel strikes all around it, fear rises in Lebanon's Sidon. reeling from successive crises. The people of Sidon worry about the next one could come in the form of Israeli bombs. Many in Sidon also wonder if Israel's war will hit their shops and homes, as towns on either side of the city have been hit by Israeli airstrikes or drone attacks. That's Al Jazeera in March of this year. Just another couple ones I think are significant and important to show that we need to be keeping our eye on Hezbollah's footprint in Sidon in relationship to Ezekiel 28. The IDF strikes Hezbollah's arms depot deep inside Lebanon after a drone attack on the north. The Israeli Defense Forces on Monday afternoon struck what it said was two weapons depots belonging to Hezbollah, a terror group near Lebanon's southern coastal city of Sidon. That's the time of Israel in February of 2024, last one. Israel strikes hit factories near Lebanon's city of Sidon. The Israeli army also confirmed that the army had targeted Hezbollah's infrastructure in Sidon. So as we talk about this, the prophecy goes on to basically tell us that when Sidon has been judged, and then we'll say there'll no longer be a pricking briar or painful thorn around the house of Israel from among all those who are around them who despise them. That's Ezekiel 28 verses 24. And he goes on to say that in 25 and 26 that he's going to regather the Jews out of the nations. We see that's been going on. They've been scattered. He's going to bring them back in their land, and they will dwell safely. They will dwell securely. They will build houses. They will plant vineyards, and they will dwell securely when God executes judgments on all those around them who despise them. We're not talking politically brokered things here. We're talking about God judging the people around Israel, and these people are also listed in Psalm 83. You would have Hezbollah to the north in Lebanon. Psalm 83, briefly for your listeners, is a prophecy that talks about a confederacy is going to come together. Their goal is to destroy the nation of Israel, that the name of Israel will be remembered no more. And then we find out who they are, and these are actually the people who came against Israel in 1948, but that did not entirely fulfill the prophecy. But it includes Lebanon to the north, where you have Hezbollah. It includes Syria and Iraq. It includes the Gaza, where the Philistia, the Hamas are, ancient Philistia. The Palestinians, we find them as Edomites. They have ethnical representation in Palestinians today. Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Jordan. Even though Egypt and Jordan have fragile peace treaties with Israel, Bible prophecies depict that they will be avoided out as wars will ensue between the IDF and Egypt and Jordan. And I believe that's all part of Psalm 83. Now, when this happens and those judgments are executed upon those around Israel that despise them, fulfilling Ezekiel 28, verses 20 through 26, you would then have Ezekiel 38, because the prerequisite conditions for Ezekiel 38 are that Israel must be dwelling securely, without walls, bars, nor gates, in the midst of the land, and great receipt of plunder and booty, because that's what Russia, Turkey, and its coalition of 9 members in Ezekiel 38 come after, that plunder and booty. So right now, Ezekiel 38 cannot happen until Ezekiel 28 happens, and that would involve Sidon, probably the stepping stone judgment where Hezbollah is, and that's the war that's looming to the north of Israel as we speak. And then ultimately it goes on into a massive judgment against the whole pricking briar around Israel, the painful thorn, including those countries that I believe are in Psalm 83.
Okay, Bill, here's a logical question. I think it's logical anyways. At any one point in time, biblical prophecies, like the one we're looking at, people of God 100 years ago would have looked at it one way. 1,000 years ago, they would have looked at it another way. We're now looking at it in a different way because so much other parts of Scripture have come to fruition. I mean, Israel's back in the land, and now we see Hezbollah, Tyre, Sidon, poking at Israel. Okay, that wasn't possible 100 years ago, and so forth. So things are different, which is why new considerations can come to light. But in regard to Ezekiel 38, and what we're talking about here is Psalm 83, and then the Ezekiel 28 passage and all that we're talking about. Is there any reason, as you study Scripture, why these conflicts we've been seeing, Hamas, Gaza, one of those neighbors to the west, moving up into Hezbollah, all these things could not be incremental, moving step by step, while at the same time, Ezekiel 38 and 39, the players, Iran and Russia and Turkey, they're all moving at the same time. Is there anything that would, of necessity, separate these two and could not just allow an incremental, week by week, month by month build-up of the neighbors around Israel that would then lead right directly into Ezekiel 38, 39?
Well, there will be a build-up, but basically we need to understand the distinctions. There are two separate events. Psalm 83 is a climactic conclusion of the Arab-Israeli conflict. These participants, the belligerents in Psalm 83, are not listed in Ezekiel 38. Ezekiel lists 9 populations. None of them share common borders with Israel. That would basically be Russia, Turkey, Iran, some of the breakaway Soviet Republic countries, probably some of the stands, some North African countries like Libya, Sudan, Algeria, maybe Morocco, etc. Outer ring of countries, they don't share common borders with Israel. They've never harbored an ancient hatred of Israel. They will come against them. That's entirely different than Psalm 83, and they're coming against them for plunder and booty. They're destroyed by God supernaturally with a great earthquake. There'll be every man's sword will come against its brother. They will start killing each other in panic. There'll be fire, flooding rains, pestilence and brimstone, etc. That's entirely different than Psalm 83. These countries that I listed earlier, they share common borders with Israel. They've been Israel's enemies since time immemorial. And they will come in a final siege. We find in Zechariah 12, verse 2, they will come against Israel, the peoples round about, in a siege of Judah and Jerusalem, a final attempt, and God will make it a cup of trembling to them. And then ultimately we find out in Zechariah 12, verse 6, where in Zechariah 12, it says, the Israeli defense forces will be like a fire pan in the woodpile, and they shall devour, and those around them shall be like sheaves. And they will devour all of them around them on the right hand and the left hand, and that would be, of course, what we're talking about in Psalm 83. So different defeats. Psalm 83 goals, they went to promised land for themselves, and it's entirely different motive as well.
All right, excellent, Bill. Ladies and gentlemen, there's a lot of insight and evaluation of Scripture went into what Bill just said. You probably were not able to write it all down. That's why I go back and get this program again. Transcripts available online, and just read through it and listen to the program again as we walk through this. Now, when we come back, we're going to conclude with how soon could this conflict actually be upon us. All right, as we go into our final segment here now, again, I just mentioned just briefly in the other segment that these programs, all of these programs we do on Israel, the Middle East, and prophecy. Dr. Bill Salus is with me today, is generally been with me about once a month, sometimes more. Dr. Carl Broggi has been in that spot. If you go back far enough on our archives, which you can find in standinthegapradio.com or on our app, Stand in the Gap, you will find an extraordinary number of programs on the same theme when we began with Dr. Jimmy DeYoung, who was with us every other week and continued until his passing. We have an absolute wealth of information with some of the very, very best that is in this field of Israel and Middle East and prophecy, and all of that is available and you can find there, and I would encourage you to take advantage of that. Just a tremendous wealth. Then on Dr. Bill Salus's website, prophecydepot.com, he has a wealth of books and materials and videos and research and all, again, on this theme that is available. And so I would encourage you, you have multiple places that you can go. I just want to inform you of that now. All right, Bill, two things I want to do in this segment, if we can here. One, talk about how soon events may occur there. I want to cite a couple of things here. And then the second one, basically how people, God-fearing people who are being aware of these things we're talking about should respond. But in preparation for this today, I noted there were three that I picked out, and you have no doubt a whole lot more, and I think you cited one earlier. But that war, not a minor conflict, but an all-out war that has been in consideration, discussion for a long time. Israel's been aware of it. The world's been aware of it. The fact that it is imminent. Now, you just said a little bit ago, some say it could be by the end of July, but here are three that I've noted just in the last couple of days. Turkish military have ordered the sinking of ships that would be in the Mediterranean that would be on their way to help Israel. Well, that's a big deal. That brings Turkey right into it. That's one just a few days ago. A second one, numerous people are saying Hezbollah war, a war, could start in earnest by mid-August. So you actually bumped it up to the end of July, perhaps. The Minister of Defense, Israel, Gallant, made the statement that the situation in Lebanon with Hezbollah that we're talking about, in his opinion, has gone too far to go away. Well, that's interesting. So here, just my question to you. What are your thoughts regarding Middle Eastern events we're talking about, and other global circumstances that would indicate that a major war between Hezbollah to the north and Israel is imminent, not likely to dissipate and go away?
Okay, great, Sam. You mentioned Turkey. They're down the road a little bit in Bible prophecy in Ezekiel 38, which we discussed probably won't happen until after Psalm 83. They have been adversarial towards Israel for quite some time now. They're very pro-Hamas, and it does not surprise us to hear this headline that they want to sink ships now, sending help to Israel. But the one I'm watching for real closely is related to the Hezbollah ones you talked about. And I want to make a side note prophetically. In Psalm 83, Philistia, where the Hamas are, that's in the Gaza area, they're listed right next to the inhabitants of Tyre, potentially Hezbollah, in the same verse, Psalm 83, verse 7. So we see, interestingly, that, of course, Israel is in a war with Hamas, and then the day after it gets in a war initiated by Hezbollah on October 8th. These two places are listed side by side in the prophecy of Psalm 83, and they're going side by side in the news right now with this double front war going on with Israel. The reason I think we should be, and again, you mentioned Hezbollah is a much more dangerous threat than Hamas. So certainly they are. They could actually, Israel is dealing with a threat of extinction now, because not only Hezbollah would get involved, but you'd also have Syria with its chemical weapons, a proxy of Iran, as is Hezbollah and Hamas. You would have Iran probably get involved. They're already chomping at the bit to do another massive attack of rockets, headlines point out, into Israel, which they did in April, sent over 300 missiles into Israel. Fortunately, 99% of those were intercepted. You also have the Houthis, a proxy of Iran down by Yemen. They have precision-guided missiles, they say, that can hit Tel Aviv. So this war that's coming with Hezbollah will not confine itself to Hezbollah, and it's coming. Headlines speak for themselves. Israel approves operational plan for Lebanon offensive, says Army. And France, that's on June 18th, 2024, the France 24 news. Anyway, certain countries like the U.S., Canada, Saudi Arabia, Germany, Netherlands, Kuwait, North Macedonia have recently told their citizens to get out of Lebanon because they see the war coming. Israel warns of obliterating war if Iran warns of obliterating war if Israel launches an offensive in Lebanon. New York Times on June 29th of this year. Israel-Hezbollah war could erupt without notice in weeks if deal not reached. That's in the Middle East side, June 20th. I can go on. The list goes on and on. We read some headlines earlier about Israel's already attacking places like Sidon and things like that. So from my perspective, Sam, I think that the war is coming very soon. Israel says it may have to enter in by the end of July. I think this war is a war that will lead to prophetic implications. Israel finds itself in a prison rule fight with missiles coming all on every side. Iran, Syria, Hezbollah, like we talked about, the Houthis, and they will have to pull out a nuclear weapon. I think there's already concerns that the Iron Dome is going to be depleted, which was a strategy of Hezbollah's since day one of October 8th. And basically, I think they have to pull out a nuclear weapon, and they probably will destroy the city of Damascus in Isaiah 17, verses 1. And I believe that would be probably the first stepping stone of another prophecy. I believe Sidon goes down probably first, Ezekiel 28, verses 20 through 26. Then Damascus goes down second, Isaiah 17. And then I think you'll get into Psalm 83. And I think you get into Ezekiel 38. There's also prophecy dealing with Iran in Jeremiah chapter 49, verses 34 through 39. Elam, that's the side of Iran on the Persian Gulf. There in that prophecy, too, there's a disaster going to happen there. So I think what we're looking at right now is the ancient predictions are going to come off their parchments from the scriptures of prophecy, and they're going to pound down on the pavement, and the world is now going to change the day after this all starts to happen. Nothing's remained the same for them at this point. And I think everything's going to change again here real soon as prophecies start to happen.
I tell you, we have less than a minute left, so I'm not going to be able to get into too much more with you. But that's an excellent overview, Bill. And I think, ladies and gentlemen, we're thinking about, what do we do What does a God-fearing person do? Well, I'll tell you what I am doing in response to this. One is we're trying to make this information available to all of you who are listening. Those with ears to hear and eyes to see will hear the word of truth. And why does God give us this prophetical involvement? Well, we've talked about this before. Why? Not to scare us, but to prepare us. Prepare us for what? Well, for the return of Christ, because we knew these pieces are linked closely. Also, to encourage us not to be hanging on to these things we see around us, because it will all soon disappear, but be very active in sharing the gospel, being that light and the salt. That's why we're here. And use these opportunities as they're unfolding to speak to other people about the veracity of Scripture, the reality of fulfilling prophecy, and all of these things coming to fruition in our day. It's amazing. So that's personally how we do it. Dr. Bill Salus, thank you so much for being with me today again. ProphecyDepot.com is his site. A lot of information. And, of course, our site as well for this program and others, StandInTheGapRadio.com.